Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I want to talk about the fantasy people have about Project Highland and/or Project Jupiter. You can see here the Tesla Model 3. There's all this talk that Tesla Model 3 is undergoing some kind of redesign that's popularly known as Project Highland. There was a question in the Q4 2022 Tesla finance earnings recall that I think really relates to showing that Project Highland is fiction and Project Juniper is also fiction. Project Highland is the supposed redesign of Model 3. Project Jupiter is the supposed redesign of Model Y. Model Y is a 3-year-old vehicle. Why people think it's going to be redesigned, I don't know. But there's some interesting stuff in here. Let's dive into it. Are you ready? Let's go.
Zach, I'd like to follow up on the data point you just gave on cost.
That's Pierre Ferragu, who is a Wall Street analyst who regularly follows Tesla, regularly asks questions at earnings calls. He's probably one of the more insightful Wall Street analysts covering Tesla. I think he's definitely worth listening to. But anyway, listen to his question.
If I look back at the COGS per car, you guys bottomed close to $36,000 in the middle of 2021. And then the number went up as you had to face with inflation in input costs and the ramp of Berlin and Texas. And this quarter, I think we are close to 40K, and we peaked maybe close to $42,000 at some point last year. And so my question from here is, how much time do you think it takes you to get back to this kind of 36K, which would mean, Berlin and Texas and like the input cost, all that stuff is normalizing. Is that and that would be like a kind of like a 10% decline in the COGS per car. Is that something we can hope to see this year, or is that too optimistic?
Okay, so just to be clear, he's talking about COGS per car, COGS, cost of goods sold. That it was down as low as $36,000 a car. It had climbed to $42,000 a car. As of this particular earnings report, it had declined back to around $40,000 a car, and he's asking whether the cost of goods sold is going to decline. This relates to Project Highland and Model Y, Project Juniper. If you can get the cost of goods sold down, that helps get increased margin. If you sell the car at the same price, but your cost of goods sold is lower, you end up having higher margins. So let's listen to the response.
The Austin and Berlin ramp inefficiencies in 4680 will make a substantial amount of progress on that over the course of the year. And that's
Zach Kirkhorn, the CFO or master of coin for Tesla, speaking, relating that the ramp, the early production phase from Tesla Giga Berlin and Tesla Giga Texas is relatively inefficient. So the cost of goods sold is higher while you're ramping factories. As you get your factories ramped, the cost of the factory is spread over a larger number of vehicles and the cost of goods sold per vehicle comes down.
we're doing a lot of work on cost reduction outside of that. And we talked about supply chain costs, expedites logistics, attacking everything. On the raw materials and inflation side, where lithium is the large driver there, and this was a meaningful source of cost increase for us, we'll have to see where lithium prices go. And, we're not fully exposed to lithium prices, but I think in general, is what we've seen from our forecast here, cost per car of lithium in 2023 will be higher than 2022. So, that's a headwind that would have to be overcome to return back to those levels. So I don't think we'll get there this year, but I think we'll make progress. And we'll continue to find ways to offset these raw material costs that we don't have control over.
So an important note there is Zach says, I don't think we'll get there this year, 2023. This is the Q4 2022 earnings call, which is in January of 2023. He's referring to 2023. The cost of goods sold for Model 3 and Model Y will not get back down to $36,000 per car during the year 2023. The idea that there's going to be some dramatic redesign of Model 3 and or Model Y that's going to dramatically lower the cost of producing these vehicles was rejected just like 5 months ago by Zach Kirkhorn. And there's more in here that's going to show that.
Like on the non-cells raw material, we begin to capture, benefits of indexes tapering off. But due to the length of various supply chains, it does take time before this is reflected in our financials.
I forget the guy's name. This is one of Tesla's supply chain guys. They presented at Investor Day.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, my name is Karn. and my team leads supply chain for electronics, powertrain, and battery at Tesla.
Hi, my name is Roshan. I've been with Tesla for over 14 years. My team manages vehicle commodities, solar, logistics, planning, and capital equipment.
And he's relating the supply chain costs that are affecting cost of goods sold in the cars. If your materials that go into the cars cost more, the cost of the car is more.
While aluminum is down like 20% year over year, steel is about 30% down year over year. The global non-cells raw materials market continues to be influenced by geopolitical situations in Europe, high production costs due to labor cost increases and energy spikes, and disruptions due to natural disasters like typhoon in Korea 4 months ago, pandemic lockdowns. So we believe that meaningful price corrections will ultimately come, but it remains uncertain exactly when. In the meantime, we continue to redesign supply chain to make it more efficient and work with our supplier partners to find more efficiencies, streamline logistics and transportation to reduce costs.
So an important point there is that aluminum, which is a big part of Tesla vehicles, the giga castings are aluminum, and steel, which is another big part of any car, those prices are down 20 to 30%. Lithium is up a lot, and lithium, even though it's a fairly small amount of mass in the car, is a very expensive part of the mass of the car. And I think battery materials in general have been expensive. So there's some offsetting effect there. The primary effect, it sounds like, is really the impact of Giga Texas and Giga Berlin producing in low volumes. And as they ramp, that's actually the thing that Tesla has the most control over, and that's the thing that's going to drive the cost down more. But as Zach said, it's not going to get us down to $36,000 a car by the end of 2023.
Sorry, Drew wanted to say something.
I was just going to say.
Now, this is Drew Baglino. I'm the co-founder of the Baglino Fan Club, along with Jordan Gieske of The Limiting Factor. And I think Drew's comments here are really, really instructive as well.
We're also, our fleet is starting to mature, the 3Y fleet, and we're gathering a lot of data out of that fleet to understand how we can sort of bring some margin that we didn't know we had out of the product. So over the course of 2023 on the powertrain side, we're actually going to go after sort of some materials where we're paying for more performance than we need, or we have more content than we need without impacting reliability at all.
Now, there's an important detail. We're going after things where we can reduce costs in the vehicle and powertrain performance and content. Now, what did we see that happened recently? Tesla reintroduced Tesla Model 3 long range with only 333 miles of range instead of 353 or 358 miles of range. It's not quite a 10% reduction in range. It's about an 8% reduction in range, which they felt we don't need that much range in long range Model 3. And by shaving 8% of the batteries effectively, or maybe it's 10% of the batteries out of the car, and maybe they're using a different materials in the batteries. We don't know what the battery pack is in the long range Model 3 yet, but they're shaving some costs there. Now, the other side of that is you're not getting a 358 mile range vehicle anymore. You're losing 25 miles of range in your vehicle. So, but Tesla's determined we don't need that much range in long range Model 3. But this is not the story you would expect to hear if there was some massive redesign of Model 3 and Model Y. Now, Drew did say that the Model 3 and Model Y line is maturing, which is suggesting that it may be due for some kind of refresh at some point. But at the same time, they're rapidly expanding Model Y production and Model Y deliveries. Maturing, yes, but they're a long way from needing to do a significant refresh of Model 3 and Model Y. And there's no indication in this conversation, in this discussion, that there's any plans to do any major changes to Model 3 and Y during the calendar year 2023. It's pretty apparent they're working with the platform to improve cost structure, supply chain, re-engineer certain details of the car to reduce costs, right? Powertrain, content. It doesn't sound like there's a plan to make radical changes to Model 3 or Model Y. And if you're hearing that, tell me where you're hearing it, because I'm not hearing it and I haven't heard anything else Tesla said. This runs contrary to the story we've been told in the fantasy fiction of Project Highland.
And that will actually add up to a pretty significant cost reduction on the powertrain side over the course of 2023. So we're not just sort of relying on supply. We're also doing design actions to bring cost out.
So in case you didn't hear all the details, there is a transcript of this. This is from, I forget which stock website that Probably a couple of, I think it might be from Seeking Alpha, it might be from Morning, I forget which one. These websites that publish the transcripts. Anyway, here's Pierre Farragut's question. You can see COGS per car was down to $36,000, peaked at 42,000. We're close to 40,000 now. Can you get back to 36,000? That was the question. Here's Zach's partial answer. Austin and Berlin ramp inefficiencies will make a substantial amount of progress over the course of the year. That's within Tesla's control. The supply chain stuff is not completely within Tesla's control. That's what he means. Doing a lot of work on cost reduction outside of that, supply chain costs, expedites. Expedites is where we have to, get something quicker, which costs more. Logistics, raw materials, lithium's a large driver. It's the large driver there, and a meaningful source of cost increase. So if lithium prices come down, that's another thing that brings the cost of goods sold down in the Model 3 and Model Y and other vehicles, and that helps Tesla increase margin. It does appear that lithium prices are down, so we have a good indicator that for a variety of reasons, we're going to see Tesla's cost of goods sold come down closer to that $36,000 figure, but I don't think it's going to get all the way there. Zach says we're not fully exposed to lithium prices, but cost per car of lithium in 2023 will be higher than 2022. That's a headwind that would have to overcome to return back to those levels. I don't think we'll get there this year, but I think we'll make progress. So cost of goods sold per car is not going to get down to 36,000. Maybe it gets down to 38,000. Maybe it gets down to 37,000. And they're working to offset those costs. And then you got the unknown speaker. Again, this is the guy on the supply chain team. He's talking about supply chain, aluminum down 20% year over year, steel down 30% year over year, global non-cells raw materials market influence. There's all these things going on in the geopolitical situation that has impacts. There was a typhoon in Korea, but he believes that meaningful price corrections will ultimately come, but it remains uncertain exactly when. Meantime, we continue to redesign our supply chain to make it more efficient. And then you have Drew Baglino's comments. Drew says, our fleet is starting to mature. That's an interesting statement from Drew that does suggest they may be thinking about a substantial redesign of Model 3 and Y at some point in the future, because the fleet is starting to mature. When the fleet is fully mature, maybe you got to think about, okay, what are we doing next? And they're learning from the fleet, how can we bring some more margin that we didn't know we had out of the product? How can we squeeze additional margin out? How can we reduce costs, basically? In the course of producing the vehicles, they're finding other ways to achieve efficiencies. That is the Tesla way, right? How do we make this better? How do we make this better? How do we make this better? We're actually going to go after sort of some materials where we're paying for more performance than we need, or we have more content than we need without impacting reliability at all. You can clearly see how the long-range Model 3 went from 358 miles of range, I think, to 333 miles of range. That's a pretty clear statement of performance or content that we don't need. Right? I think that's what he's referring to. Is there something else he's referring to? I don't know. He's talking about powertrain. Is there something they're doing on the motor side? I'm not sure. And that will add up to a pretty significant cost reduction on the powertrain side over the course of 2023. We're not just relying on supply, we're also doing design actions to bring cost out. So there's some optimistic stuff here from Drew and from the supply chain team. We do think we can get more meaningful cost reductions out of the vehicles. Does that get us all the way to 36,000? They didn't contradict Zach on that point. But again, no hint anywhere in any of this that there's some massive redesign coming for Model 3 or Model Y. Not a hint of it all. This is 5 months ago. It's less than 5 months ago. If there was a hint if there was a plan in 2023 to make some really radical redesign of Model 3 and Model Y, this would be borderline malfeasance to tell people, hey, listen, we're not going to make meaningful changes to Model 3 and Model Y this year. We're just going to squeeze some costs out. That's my take on it. So Model 3 still exists. It's still going. We're still making progress on Model 3. But I don't think Project Highland is happening. I know everyone thinks I'm nuts. Everyone on the Tesla influencer community is convinced that Model 3, Project Highland is happening. I don't see anything from Tesla on it to the extent that Tesla's talked about it at all. Tesla has pretty much denied any changes that Project Highland is coming. They've never acknowledged that Project Highland is a real thing. It's just this fantasy that other people have come up with, and I don't know where you guys are coming up with it. You want to believe some meaningful change is happening. The engineering resources are focused on the next generation vehicle. They're focused on Cybertruck. They're focused on Semi. Tesla has limited engineering resources available. They're going to do Roadster. It's just not a priority yet. It will be a priority in a year or two, I think, but not yet. And it's probably not going to be Project Highland. It's probably going to be a radical redesign of Model 3 and Model Y. I think Tesla needs a radical redesign of Model S and Model X first. to bring those prices down to the point where they can qualify for the tax. You know, if you imagine a Model X that could qualify for the tax credit by coming under $80,000. Imagine a Model S that could qualify for the tax credit by coming under $55,000, which is a pretty big stretch for Model S. But if you could get something like a Model S down to $54,900 and then get a $7,500 tax credit, that thing will sell like bananas, like crazy, nuts. And that would make Model S and X meaningful for the company, where currently they're not very meaningful. So those are the things I'm looking for in the future of Tesla in terms of vehicle redesign, not some tweaks to Model 3 and Model Y that aren't going to be terribly meaningful. Please let me know what you think of the new context of shooting videos in the Zen booth. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please check out the t-shirts at elonbits.com. Please support me on the Locals platform on Patreon, as a YouTube channel member, or now as a Twitter subscriber. Supporters get additional content. They get early access to some videos like this one. Please check out my other videos, like this video, share, and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.